more than 30 years, Chris has been finding ways to work with cows, donkeys and ecological systems more broadly to restore the health of 77,000 hectares of country in the Kimberley in northwestern Western Australia. And he's going to talk today about water security and biosecurity. So please welcome Chris.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, everyone. Now, work out this technology. Can we actually put it down a bit so I can?
Oh, sure.
That'll be all right. Right. What would we do here? What advice would we give here? Context allows us to step into conscious incompetence. Is that right? No, right? You see, actually I feel very much, I'm not at ease. Normally I'm out in the paddock and I don't actually talk, the land does the talking and I just ask questions and I translate. Now the next best thing is to have the slides do some of the talking and I'll try and just be the message and translate. So context, if we don't know the context, it's very hard to ask the right questions. And when we do start looking at context, we realize, hang on, there are questions we need to ask. So, yeah, contexts differ. And so do the perspectives. Now, I'm going to what extent water security is an issue down here, I really don't know. But what if that island was actually a whole lot bigger than what it is, the island to the north of us? What if that island to the north of us was actually dehydrating? Would that actually impact water security in Tasmania? I don't know. What if we got a fire? So anyway, what I'll do is I'll just give a little introductory video. So that's my introduction. So for some reason we're not getting the commentary that goes with that, but that shows us where we are. And the country, you can't walk to it, we had to fly in there. By the time we got there, we realized that the country was crying out for help. We had sunshine, we had water, but the sunshine was just heating up the landscape, the water's washing things away. And then we started experimenting, and we realized more was possible, so you can see a few changes over time. The challenge is changing, well, the first challenge was changing raindrops from bombshells into mist irrigators. The way you do that is slow the water down and get it back into the soils. What we're after is soils that are actually like cottage cheese, not cheddar. What we first started off was there is a bit of sound there, but it's not, you can't hear it. So here's the soil. We've just dug we're going to dig through a bit of mulch. And then we look at the soil and we can see there's actually a sponge beginning to form. Below the sponge we have that cottage cheese-like structure. That's what helps the water to percolate and filter into the soil instead of just running off and taking nutrients with it. So we talk. What we find is more grass leads to more water, and we're changing the behavior of the herbivores with more mouths and more hooves, and that's some donkeys as well. With more mouths and hooves, we're actually slowing the water down. We're slowing the raindrop down. We're getting water infiltrating, and we end up with more water longer. So that creek there used to run seasonally dry. After 3 years, it's started flowing perennially. This is what's got me into hot water, and that is we're saying let's use what's there and use the severe grazers and the severe well, we heard this morning sheep trample severely as well, but certainly the severe grazers are pretty unique, and Australia lost all of those. So we've got these new megafauna here. Can we use them to mulch, evenly fertilize and prune vegetation? And what you're seeing is small herb, but on high density, they just mulching, pruning and fertilizing, and then we move them on to the next patch. And the idea is we're reintroducing nature's gardens, and they run on solar energy. And this is after they've been through here. It's already, country's dried out, so we look how effective we've been. We're looking for a bit of green. There's not much green there, but a little bit of green will tell us some of the water that dropped out of the sky is still there. Not only that, more importantly, the green's telling us we're actually harvesting some of that gratis energy that's being beamed in on us every day. Problem is we don't have enough herbivores to cycle everything that grows each year, so we use fire as well. I don't like to use fire, but fire is one of the tools, and it's in the toolbox, and we do need to use fire as well. So flowing water is, at the end of the day, what attracted us. We realized by the time we got there, we're losing that flowing water. We're trying to recreate an abundance in our landscape, and I've got, I'll get back. I think we can just about skip. Right. So I actually have always wanted to come to Tasmania, and I was waiting for a heat wave and a drought, and then Matthew invited me, so thank you, Matthew, and thank you for being here and being part of a shared learning experience. What do we do when we have an ambition and we recognize that we're dealing with forces that are far greater than we have, and in fact forces that we can't even anticipate? So my experience has been that attempting to subordinate nature can only ever be a short-term endeavor. And I have no idea, as you saw where I come from, I have no idea how our city-based cousins can actually relate to what it actually means when you're sandwiched in between civilization and an untamable geosystem. But that's where we are as farmers, custodians. Life is all about relationships. And when dealing with the forces of nature, I think it's wise to recognize how insignificant we all really are. And with a sense of awe and humility, we attempt to work with the nature that we're confronted with. And as my sister did with elephants, we as regenerative land managers, we attempt to work with what is out there. And as Ian and Di just pointed out, most of the energy and most of the stuff that we manage is actually under our feet. So I think it's very important to understand that we're dealing with something that we don't fully understand. Oh, yeah, sorry. Right. As a land manager, up north, we juggle 3 balls. And as custodians, it's an ongoing juggling act. I think it's someone who's been on the forefront of this juggling act since '92. I realize it's very easy to mess up, and I think we got to understand that when there's a reason to be juggling, we those of us who've actually who do this, we do that primarily for our great-grandchildren. And what I believe is what's good for my great-grandchildren will be good for everybody's children and grandchildren. 20 years ago, the science began catching up. Now we can safely say the science has caught up. This does not mean the science is settled. The science is never settled, and academia must keep on challenging anything, any new information that challenges the prevailing notions. Science merely offers us a process to move forward more confidently, and it makes us aware of where we need to be careful. But so the first question that people always ask is, the money. So we know that we can't be in the green when we're in the red. For me, it's a justification of time and capital invested since 1985. So that means, very realistically, my biggest expense every year is opportunity cost. Where there's a will, there's a way. Off-farm income has payrolled my learning curve. To carry on, in Kachana's unique context, management will need to be holistic. So in that sense, I'm a savoury scholar. However, I am prepared to look at any other processes or decision-making processes that are as good or better. In the meantime, that works quite well. The direction that I'm favouring is Joel Salatin's fiefdom model. So anybody looking at succession, I strongly recommend Joel Salatin's book, Fields of Farmers. So this is actually ball number one. This is the one that excites me and it drives my passion. And that's to explore the relevance of Australia's new megafauna and multi-species interactions. The question is, can we together, old and new Australians, build a healthier continent? Can we get animals to function in line with their original ecological function? Will self-regulating principles come to our aid? We just heard, those who were in the other tent there heard Ian and Di Haggerty saying how all of a sudden things start happening. Should we use animals to rebuild healthy landscapes? The questions are there, it's open. What we're seeing is herbivores behaving as nature intended make a huge difference. And what excites me is that animal behavior is actually, it harnesses animal energy. And this energy is potentially solar powered and it's a renewable energy resource. It's manageable. It can work for us, but it also can work against us. So the challenge is to manage and influence animal behavior appropriately within given contexts. So in functional savanna landscapes, we have 3 teams at work. And these 3 teams, they don't compete, they actually work for each other. So we have the producers or the sunlight harvesters, and their main role is just to bring in the energy, get the paycheck in, distribute it underground, feed the upper level management. Then you have the consumers, and then you have the recyclers. So the main job of the consumers is to consume, nothing wrong with consumption, as long as the production and the recycling and upcycling continues. Now I've got the elephant in there because he's the largest land-based herbivore left on the planet. And according to scientists, Australia lost nearly all its large herbivores thousands of years just shortly after humans arrived on this continent. So this is what apparently some of these guys look like. And for thousands of years, Australia's had to do without them. So we've had all sorts of management techniques that have been that have evolved over time, but there's a nasty fact there in a world with growing demand and growing populations. We have to understand that biomass burning short circuits savanna economies. Now, is this good or is it bad? It really depends. It's what are we trying to achieve? So this is where I think context is so important. So let's just zoom out. So here are 4 choices that sort of stare us in the face. We can see where we are. We can try and sustain a largely dysfunctional ecosystem as it is, and that's a balancing act. You know, try hopping on a bicycle and staying in one spot. It's pretty hard work. The other thing is we could give way to trends and that are pushing us towards ecological decline. Then we don't have to do much. We could. Some people are saying let's colonize other planets. If I look at Mars, I think actually we've probably been there. I know places on this planet that look like that. So I'm saying, why shouldn't we first look at recolonizing human-made deserts or regreening our own planet? What if we put some of Australia's introduced gardeners to work? What if? I'm not saying we've got to do that everywhere, but what if we do? And why not look at those that actually have a long track record of collaborating with humans? So for those who are not already in this, I invite you to watch this space, because I think the new megafauna and the potential of harnessing renewable energy, the animal energy, I think that's just a space we haven't even begun to explore. All right. The water security, as I say, I don't know to what extent this applies to Tasmania. So the way I grew up, the question would be, yes, we have to report an accident. And we began reporting on Kachana, we began reporting in 92. So here we are, February 2014 in Kununurra. This is not an accident. The road did not get severed. After a day or two, the traffic resumed, and we could call it a near miss. And anyway, there were plenty of witnesses to report. So once again, this got reported too, the same day, just a few kilometres to the north-northeast. In this case, was it an accident or was it a near miss? I think the insurance companies would have been debating that. That, to me, looks like a close shave for Cape Town in 2018. We're talking about over 4.5 million people here. A city slightly smaller than the size of Sydney, just about to run out of water. I would say that is a major accident that was narrowly avoided. Another close shave, but a death sentence nonetheless. So many people would call this natural, and technically speaking, they may be correct, because this is how nature responds when we play with matches when everything's dry. And yeah, we end up with more and more country looking like this. And is it natural? Yes, it's natural, but as Ray Archuleta would say, the country's naked, thirsty, hungry, and running a fever. Fire, drought, and flood are siblings. All three are systems of ecosystem dysfunction. They're mostly spawned by unhealthy vegetation and dying soils, and this is not new knowledge. It simply doesn't suit much of today's compartmentalized thinking. And we have independent bureaucracies at work directing us how to deal with each symptom. At least that's where I'm from. I don't know what it's like down here. So let's connect a few dots. So we have the bones of dead herbivores lying in unhealthy senescent vegetation. Then we have fire. Then we have bare dehydrating ground that is subjected to weeks and months of radiation. We have wind erosion. We have compaction that seal the surface. Then raindrops become bombshells, and the rivers flow red as we lose soil. And instead of quenching a thirsty landscape, water further seals it, and the water runs off. Erosion accelerates at an exponential rate. And we have accidents. Downstream, the reporting will use words like acts of God, natural disaster, climate change. And it seems to be there's a very strange lack of interest to the compounding effects of deteriorating, or what's happening in changes in the microclimate upstream. And we get a $200 million repair bill for a township of Warman in 2011. This could be the result of an accident. As it happened, that accident was actually waiting to happen for a long time. It only got reported after the event. Here we have Starvation Billabong just over the range from us. It's another accident waiting to happen. And we'd been reporting for many years, but no one of any importance listened. And then in March 2011, the accident didn't happen. And this was no near miss. Those trees were alive and growing until the floodwaters arrived. So potential livelihoods got wiped out within a few hours. And we tried to report the accident, but nobody investigated. One for the price of three. A new bridge. 6 times stronger than the last one that just got washed away. This was last year. So what a deal for the engineers and the construction workers. The taxpayers were saddled with an unexpected cost of at least $500 million. Corporate players continue to lick their wounds as investor confidence is being tested. The costs to private operators and local residents and insurance companies are all masked by rising GDP and inflation. So the thing is, predictable events like this can be labelled accidents or natural disasters. The question I'm asking is if calling them that means that we just keep accepting more and more of them, perhaps we'd be wiser to start using different terminology. How we prepare for what drops out of the sky will impact water security. Soils for Life described the story of 100 raindrops that typically drop onto Australian landmass. 50 of them evaporate. Gravity and evaporation tend to be by far the greatest thieves of water, and with good surface management, we can prepare for them and begin to minimize both. In order to rehydrate, water needs to percolate through the body or through the soil. The lesson that nature is attempting to teach us is very simple. No water, no life. Water security implies consistent reserves and appropriate hydration throughout the year. And water security is a process that must be driven from the bottom up. It can't be legislated top down. It's like healing a wound. It's like any growth. It's a top-down process. It's a bottom-up, inside-out process. So it needs community backing. And so for the individual citizen, water security remains a circle of concern stuff. But at a community level, it's actually our circle of collective or common influence. And that's why it's so important that the provision of water security requires active community support. And even better would be the collaboration from top-down regulators who encourage innovation and empower custodians to manage these bottom-up processes. This is an attempt to put the message onto one single page. And on our website, we actually describe this in more detail in the news for early last year. If you look at the picture in the top left, that water is water coming through our gorge. Upstream of that is one of the most densely stocked areas in the Kimberley. And we've got clean water going into that coffee-coloured Chamberlain River. Just to give you a bit of an idea of what we're managing, that catchment that goes through that gorge is 120 square kilometres. On average, we may get about 900 millimetres of rain. If 60% of that runs off through that gorge, we're looking at filling up a swimming pool that's a body of water 4 metres deep, 10 metres wide, from the Kimberley, 600 kilometres past Alice Springs. That's just on an average season. So, people look at managing the land. I'm saying managing the water is probably the biggest issue. It's not how much land we've got, it's what's happening to the water. Without first water security, any quest for sustained biosecurity will be simply another forever war. It's a war against nature, and it's an unwinnable war against the far more intelligent design of natural systems. And the good news is we already have an industry that has the people, the knowledge, the skill sets, and the tools to radically improve water security. on mainland of Australia and beyond. We could actually begin to work with nature to recreate the abundance. And once we do that, we don't need to do battle with her. As pastoralists, we offer solutions that are family-friendly, community-friendly, low-tech, high-skill. And such solutions promise new knowledge, new skills, new jobs, new industries, and particularly new wealth. All we require is the green light for regenerative pastoralism and real incentives. That is, not only producing food, but actually taking what we do, all these skill sets that we use in the industry to feed people who can't feed themselves, to take those skill sets, those tools, that knowledge beyond the production areas to where most of the raindrops, where those areas where currently we're growing the wildfire, the drought, and the floods. So it's such partnerships, possibilities with nature. That's what gives me hope for us, our children, grandchildren, and their children in this part of the world. But I've got to get one more final slide before we get to the questions. Right. So, given the great ecological hole that was left by the loss of Australia's megafauna, do we reference our regeneration against what was reportedly here 300 years ago? Or do we reference our regeneration towards how these landscapes would have been functioning many thousands of years ago before the humans began mining them? And I'll leave that question open, and I'm happy to field other questions.
Yeah,
Ellie.
great. Thank you. Can we just have that round of applause for Chris? So we have quite a bit of time for questions. Chris, I'll ask you to repeat the question so that we can get that on the film. And yeah, over to you. Maybe you want to hold that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I apologise for all the stuttering earlier on. All right. Questions? No questions. We have questions.
I lived in Spain for a while, and in the bottom of Spain you get the mountains, and then it heads into the inland where it's flat and desolate, and there's no water. The Romans were there a long time ago, and they're creating these channels of water that would run through and spread out into that area. What about doing that in any sort of way, about channeling and then spreading?
Those things are being thought. Yes. The Romans channeled the water and took it to where we needed it. Well, my experience is that in most of the places where humans have lived in the past and where people are living now, there's actually enough that comes out of the sky. And I'm a lazy African. If I can delegate, I'll delegate. If I can get biology to do the work for me, I'm scale neutral. It will work on a square meter, will work on a hectare, will work on a catchment, will work on a larger scale. So I'd be very tempted to say, well, we do what we have to do to survive and keep the towns hydrated and everything, but at the end of the day, it's these ecological liabilities that I want to look at. And talking about Spain, I was there in 2019. We visited some Roman baths. Those Roman baths were sort of built around a little stream 2,000 years ago. That stream stopped flowing 30 years ago. It took the Spaniards 2,000 years to wreck their water cycle totally. It's the thing is, a lot of our country is very forgiving, and we've got to be very careful about rescue operations, or just dealing with symptoms. So I'd like to go to the root cause. Nature built that abundance and water security in the first place, and then biosecurity that comes on the back of that. Question is, can we use her templates? Can we work with her?
The young man in the front, and then...
Yes, young man.
What would happen if there were no natural disasters?
That is a good. What would happen if there were no natural disasters? That's like a question I heard at a conference when Joel Salatin was explaining the benefits of working with nature, and then someone said, well, what would happen to cattle prices if everybody did that? Well, the thing is, things happen. In your case, I think the problem is people would still be squabbling. They'd still find some reason to argue. And I think the idea is nature will do what she does, and it's just like you'll have a teacher, you'll have a boss that'll say things that you don't want. You're going to have to work with that. So it just makes sense to understand that a natural disaster is actually something that you can't change, but something you can try and understand, something you can try and avoid and learn from. So we're not going to get away from them. So yeah, does that help?
You just said earlier that more grass equals more water, and I'm wondering if you mean, does it rain more? Do you get it through mist or fog? More melting the soil? Like, what part of the water cycle do you think that
Right.
matters the most?
More grass, more water. Why? I will quote Alejandro from Mexico, I think, and he says, when people forget that when it rains, it doesn't rain grass. The reason why more grass means more water is we've got something changing bombshells into mist irrigators. So the raindrops come down, they shatter before they even hit the ground, they get spread out. The grass is already, there's some mulch there, and even if there's no mulch, the grass will slow down the water, and then there's a wick effect. It'll soak in water more. So it's just, the challenge certainly for us is just each year just to hang on to a little bit more water for a little longer every year. And then all of a sudden it kicks in. And it's about managing rainfall effectiveness, but the agent of influence is the animals and how we manage that surface. So we get more rain, but not more. We hang on to more rain. It's not as if more drops out of the sky, and we end up with more water hanging in there. So where I come from, the biggest thief of water is actually gravity. And the stuff just runs off because we're on bedrock. It's like a tiled roof. But then the next biggest thief of water is, thanks Alan Savory for this, is soil evaporation off bare ground. So if you've got lifeless structureless soils, the water will go in, sand soaks up water, but then the sun comes out, wind comes, and it'll just dry it off. And water, like silicon dioxide, it's got at a molecular structure, at a molecular level, there's a polarity, and it'll just keep on sucking up the water, and the water will leave just about as fast as it came down. So the challenge is the more water, which is what we're after, is we don't want to lose water that way, and we want to slow it down from the gravity thing. So yeah, more grass, more vegetation, more water.
Artin, and then Celia, and then Oscar.
Chris, you said you were monitoring about 60% of your water goes out through the canyon. Are you monitoring that over time and seeing that's rising?
Martin, I'm not, and that was just a calculation that I did because, am I monitoring how much water I'm hanging on to? Not measuring it as such. I'm measuring it indirectly because the question is how long does the stream flow persist after rainfall? With the same sort of rainfall, do I have more perennials? Do I have more perennial flow? Are the springs holding up? So what I measure in practical terms is the rainfall effectiveness. I would welcome those sort of measurements, the empirical stuff, to be measured as well, but no, we don't do that. But that's where the scientists come in, and we welcome scientists to do individual.
Celia?
Chris, what's your day-to-day management for actually managing your soil surface so you're getting a higher water infiltration and retention?
What's the day-to-day management? So if we go back to a slide that I had where I said we've got the three teams working together, the producers, consumers, and recyclers. Managing the consumers, managing the large herbivores is my job. I would consider myself to be upper-level management. How I manage the behavior of the large herbivores. I've got to make sure that they are at the right place at the right time, for the right reason, in the right frame of mind, and so most of it's manage them, and then the rest looks after itself. So it's trying to tap into how nature's self-regulated, understanding where there's gaps, like we don't have the predator-prey relationships that might have been around. We actually have different players that would have been there way back when. So it's seeking where we can to tweak function and focus on function. Function.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. It was amazing. One thing I've always wondered down here in southern Australia's less brittle environments, it's so often that we fence our waterways off just from livestock, vegetation, moving your mob up the creek with the cattle. What is your
Right. So when I'm in a what? Thank you. Waterways. Thanks. How do we treat our waterways, and what should large animals be in the waterways? And time is the issue, right? And I don't have any troughs unless I'm really far away from water. The animals go there. I will actually each year I'll have a different trough. I'll just have 10 meters that I've fenced off, and they can come and water, and they'll hit that, and they'll break down the bank, and then next year it's going to be a different one. So it's time is the issue. The photos that you would see where we have small pockets of non-brittle country, ideally, and we don't live in an ideal world, but ideally I don't have an hoof on there for longer than 12 hours, and I don't have it back for at least 2.5 months. So it's not only time that it's exposed to these large herbivores, it's time, and I don't like the word rest, I hate it, it's time to let the other two teams do their bit, the microbiology, the microherds, so that they can kick into action, do their thing, that the sunlight harvesters do their thing and feed them. So it's managing that time, and then you can do damage, and it'll come good. And the example that I always give is, show me a war hospital on a battlefield where there's no blood lost. It's not about how can we stop losing blood. It's about how can we get the wounded back onto action and save lives. So that's the focus, is moving forward. Yeah. I am not a racist. I believe, yes, native species, working with locals. I focus on function. Whoever does the job gets the job. New Australian, old Australian, lazy Australian, I'll wake him up, whatever. It's, unfortunately, sadly, a lot of the traditional knowledge in our area is not available to me. It's been lost, but I'm starting to build the bridges, and we're trying to find out what's around. But if we want to move forward for our grandchildren, it's no good. I don't believe we just need to turn the clock back 300 years. We need to go back quite a long way. So we need to accumulate all working knowledge and work together and focus our common ground. And if our common ground is, it doesn't matter who you are, is water. We need water. Whether you're a concert pianist, Olympic player, or a chain smoker, take away the water for 3 days, your performance is going to be the same. So the water story is the potential, that it has the potential to unite everybody who wants to live. And yeah, I think the political debates and who, what, whatever, we can do that later, and I try avoid those, and I can successfully have that. And so the people, the how do I say this without being politically correct? All our traditional native knowledge we invite, but I think we need to sit down and have a look at the current context, because, and I don't know what it's like down here, and I don't know what it's like in a lot of other areas, but in my area, I will argue that we are now trying to keep a few native species alive in an exotic landscape, and that is wrong. I mean, we don't want politically correct zoos, we want function. So inviting people to come and actually let the land talk to them, and that's what I do, and I've had a few discussions just this year again, where Aboriginals groups are saying, well, hang on, you've been there for 40 years, what you're doing seems to be working, let's compare notes. So that's happening, absolutely. But I think we've got a long, long way to go.
Chris, can I just follow on? Like, what are you seeing in terms of native species returning or thriving under the way that you're managing? That was kind of the second
So native species, how do they respond to what we're doing? Right, how do I answer that? I was, as a blower-in, I was always embarrassed by not knowing the name of all these species. And when Elaine Ingham told me that a teaspoon of soil holds 200 million bacteria alone, representing anything between 12 to 45,000 species, depending on whether it's a savanna soil or a forest soil, that's when I realized I don't have to know all the names. And so I don't even know how much of those species around are actually new Australian species that got here just a little bit before me. What I do look at is what's happening. I want to see things I've never seen before, and I want to see things I've seen before in places they've never been before. So when I see my first Gouldian finch ever in an area where I've created a shelter belt, well, to me that's a vote of confidence from the locals. When I can walk up the hill and with other people, and all of a sudden you have these little purple crested fairy wrens coming in and watching us, well, to me that's a vote of the locals' vote of confidence. When I see the marsupials doing all the nibbling after the severe grazers, that tells me, well, I don't really need to do sheep. I think my contribution to my children and grandchildren and to the community is addressing the droughts, floods and wildfires, rather than feeding just a few more people and competing on an uphill playing field. Yeah, I think so. I've got the nibblers coming in, they're eating all these new Australian species. Well, they obviously they're not racist either. They just look at function. So a healthy grass, they don't look at what type it is. But yes, I do welcome scientific third-party evaluation. Fortunately, just next door, and a lot of the country is run by AWC, Australian Wildlife Conservancy, so they've been doing at it for about 20 years. So there should be a lot of data coming out there. And yes, I would love to know from an academic point of view, and even if I'm making any mistakes, can we streamline things? But it's the focus is on effectiveness, effective function, rather than efficiency and labels and who does what.
Hey Chris, can I ask, what do you say to the naysayers who say hoofed animals not for Australia?
What? Hoofed animals are not native to Australia, and well, I'm not on top of this technology, but I do have a slide somewhere where there's an ant pad, and the ants, it's just at a different scale, but the ants they haven't got hoofs, they've got 6 legs, but it's time that does the difference. It's hooves are there to mulch, fertilize, to mulch, right? So we say our large animals, the cattle and donkeys primarily, they've got 5 mouths. 1 to feed themselves with, that's how they pay themselves with, but 4 to feed the soil. And if they're not feeding the soil, well then what's missing? Well, we've obviously got to grow more. But the hooves, it's not an issue. And then once again, apparently some scientists are saying that some of the megafauna did have hooves. It really doesn't matter. Question is, where are we? Where do we want to go? And are there better ways? And can we keep each other honest to make sure we don't derail? I mean, people have derailed in the past, and it will happen again. And we've made a lot of mistakes. And I think if we're going to move forwards into that space, it's got to be safe to make mistakes. So can we contain the learning curve? Can we work out can we find out what's reasonably rewarding and encouraging, and then get the science to keep us honest? But hooves are not an issue for me. AWC, he was in charge of the... Oh yeah, no, he wasn't AWC. He's one of the local. He was a Halls Creek boy, and he's been over east. He's been around. Yeah, he's one of the people I'm working with to bridge the cultural gap. Yeah. Yeah, and that. Yeah, so that supports the question that I had earlier on about working. Yeah, at the end of the day, we all. Yeah. The Australian story, and one of the issues that powers at B have with us is that we're using exotic species. In this particular case, it's actually donkeys. And there was a hearing on the 5th, 6th and 7th where all the witnesses gave evidence. Then a fortnight ago, the department gave their their closing documents or summary documents. We submitted our closing statements 3 days ago. On the 11th, there's going to be another hearing and then we can wait another 3 months before we know what's happened. So I can't really comment much about that because a lot of that is... But yeah, the process goes on. But yeah, I won't get into the politics.
I just was wondering if you could talk a bit about the donkeys and how you manage them and where they go and what benefits they have for the land.
All right, as I say, I can't talk about the political stuff and I don't want to talk about it. So I was given my first donkey as a 4-year-old for my fifth birthday. For the fourth birthday I got a saddle. And then I got this donkey. And I hated donkeys. You had to be fast enough to get off so it wouldn't go underneath the fence, so you could open the gates. I hated donkeys. And the stepping up to a half-blind Shetland pony, that was just So donkeys for me was a thing of the past till I came to Kachana. And I reckon there's about 1,200 head of feral cattle and about 400 feral donkeys, and the country was looking bare, and it was, it's typical set stocking thing. It's sad, it's eroding, and according to conventional wisdom, we did the destock and everything, and then things got worse. And then 97, all of a sudden, I was able to start piecing things together. That'll be part of the talk tomorrow. But I realized, hang on, we need more mouths and more hooves, and this is after having destocked 1,000 head. To keep the departments happy and having shot half the donkey population. And I realized, well, I'm not allowed to legally have too many cattle, but I still got the wild donks. Can I do with them what I did with the cattle? And that is by simulating the predator, and that is predating on them, but in a way that they do not associate my presence or the presence of vehicles with death. I can interact with them, but they realize they're being predated on. Can I change their behavior? And yes, I could, and yes, I was, and it was fascinating stuff. And that's when I realized, wow, these new Australians have this potential. They could be part of the solution. They don't have to always be part of the problem. And it's behaviours is key. So I'm finding it very interesting, and I hope that I'll muster a few people from the next generation who actually want to take things to the next level. But yeah, it's.
We have one more question, and then we're going to wrap up.
The nitty-gritty of how you manage those, where the donkeys were. How did you actually manage them into that rural country?
Well, I enticed them into they were everywhere, but then once again, they actually are smarter than horses and cattle, but that's beside the point. They realize that if I go over there, I get shot, and if I'm over here, I get left alone, and there's some salt blicks, and when that one's gone, all of a sudden another one pops up somewhere. So they'll put the animal impact where I want it, and they are being predated on, so they stick together, but they don't associate with me or the helicopters or whatever. So that allows me to interact and move around with them. And then we can also apply LSS, which I haven't done much, but it's amazing how responsive they are. You can just very quickly get them to be very responsive. So, and as I said, our domesticated animals actually have a track record of coexisting and cooperating with humans for millennia. Well, just because we can't eat them doesn't mean we shouldn't actually explore these things again.
Okay, we do have time for one more question because that was a very brief response. So is there one more question? Yes.
If the government put you in charge of regreening Australia tomorrow, what would you do?
Repeat the question.
If the government put me in charge of regreening Australia tomorrow, I would say it is very important for all of us to understand we're all in the same team. So we have the government, which by nature has to be top down, and that's the job of regulation, is to keep things in line. Our brains tell us, when automatic pilot doesn't work, we switch on the brain. But the actual movement is bottom up and moving forward. So we're all on the same team. The people at the interface between the natural world and civilization, or the wild natural world and untamed natural world and civilization, they need to be managing bottom up and whatever. So we need to be communicating and reassessing a lot of our regulation to see, is it actually in line with how nature works? And as new knowledge comes in, we need to keep on updating that stuff. So I think the first thing is, And I think we use the word somewhere here. It's the soil between the ears or whatever. That's working on that is the biggest challenge. It's the ecological challenge is not a problem.
All right. Well, can we thank Chris for his fantastic presentation? And Chris, thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your story. It was really fantastic. Now.